everybody, and welcome to the Launch Gravy Podcast. I'm your host, Larry Weber. On today's show, I'm going to be speaking with Doug Flora, Vice President of Product Marketing at EDB. Doug has a rich history in data, security, and cloud product marketing leadership across the gamut. From running product marketing at startups like Red Panda, growth businesses like Okta, and stalwart leaders such as AWS and IBM. Doug, welcome to the Launch Gravy Podcast.
Thanks, Larry. It's great to be talking to you again.
Hey, yeah. So look, let's jump into it. Like, you run product marketing as an executive at EDB. Can you tell the audience a bit more about your role, your responsibility, and offer a bit of detail, a little bit more on EDB and what is EDB and what do you do?
That sounds great. Yeah, where to start? I'll start with EDB. So EDB, Enterprise DB, is a Boston area-based database company all about Postgres. So Postgres is, for those who are not database nerds, probably the majority of the audience are not. Postgres is the most popular open source. For a long time, it was a little bit more niche, a little bit more academics oriented. But in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, it's really skyrocketed to be not just the most popular open source database, but the most popular database, in particular for developers for new applications, for a variety of reasons. And I can touch a little bit more on that later. But EDB is actually the leader in Postgres. EDB is a heavy committer, actually the leading committer in terms of code contributions to the open source project. But we also offer software and services that kind of extend the value of Postgres. And we actually recently had a big brand launch as well as product launch that kind of gets us into the analytics and AI categories as well. AI in particular, obviously, very top of mind. So it was big for me coming in February to a situation where I needed to rebuild the product marketing program several months out from this major launch. And I'll walk through some of those challenges and learnings. But to my specific role at EDB, I'm VP of Product Marketing. At Enterprise DB, product marketing is in the product organization. And you know yourself, having held numerous product marketing roles, product marketing can sit in many different places. Sure. I've had PMM roles in marketing departments, in product orgs. I've even sat in field organizations. Obviously, such a cross-functional role. My kind of personal take on this is it shouldn't matter where product marketing sits, because at the end of the day, you're usually spending equal amounts of time with product managers, with sales, with marketing, and of course with customers. In this role, I lead the product marketing team, which really handles everything from managing major product launches and feature launches, positioning and messaging, some elements of go-to-market strategy, even working with the product team on product strategy and roadmap, working very closely with our marketing cohorts to execute campaigns, sales enablement, and working in a very technical industry with very technical buyer personas. We also do quite a bit of what you might traditionally call technical marketing. Mm-hmm. So building technical assets like benchmarks, competitive intelligence, technical blogs, and things like that to support the sales cycle and the customer journey.
Oh, wow. That's great. I want to, you touched on one thing, and I want to stop and ask about it a little bit, is where marketing sits, right? You brought it up. It shouldn't matter. True. But I got an opinion on this. And that's in the sense, historically, I think product marketing had been, at least for my career, many times in the marketing org. And many times I've seen one of the things we've had to do is reach across the aisle, get into product management, get as close as you can. And in some organizations I've been in, I've seen that as a challenge. It's like product marketing is like throwing stuff over the fence and they're throwing stuff back. No bueno, totally not good. And I have seen where you're sitting now, but I've seen it as a trend even probably over the last, 5 years or so, where it's, wait a second, you got to be way close. We agree. We know that product marketing needs to be close with the product, with development, with that business, and that gets put over there. But now, is there that issue where you now find yourself throwing back over the fence with corporate marketing, and it's, no, that's BS. No, this is the product. This is real. We're close to the customer, and you feel like I would say corporate marketing or even demand gen's putting like that fresh coat of paint on, right, on many things and not close to the details. Now, Is
Yeah.
that your experience, or are you finding it a good place to be?
So this is my second time working in a product management org. I think any way you cut it organizationally, it's going to have its inherent challenges. As you pointed out, you're always reaching across the aisles, to someone.
Sure deal.
Uh, and alignment is hard, and over communicating is hard. Obviously, organizational structure can drive behaviors, and sometimes they're not the right behaviors. I think this all comes back to taking the right approach to setting goals, and just this idea of over communication of everyone. No one likes to have more meetings, but the reality is you work in a cross-functional role like PMM, similar to PM in many ways, that you are driving outcomes and goals cross-functionally.
Yeah.
You often don't entirely control your own destiny, right? Like you're trying to drive KPIs where you don't actually control all the levers. And that means that earning trust and getting alignment are super critical. Now, what might require a little extra effort does often depend where you're sitting organizationally. If you're sitting in the marketing department, there's going to be that inherent alignment with marketing leadership, and you're going to have to reach across the aisle a little bit more to the field and product management orgs. Likewise, if you sit in product, you're going to have a little bit more organic alignment with product leadership, and you're going to have to reach across the aisle a little bit more intentionally and proactively with marketing.
Yeah.
But call me an idealist. I don't think it should matter organizationally. I do think there are some advantages to being in product. Advantages of being in product, in particular at a tech company. One of the challenges that product marketing can have when it's not sitting in the product org is that extreme level of visibility into the roadmap, into product development from the earlier stages to really have kind of, to use a tech jargon, a single pane of glass view across everything that's happening in product R&D, deep insight into customer feedback. Those things should come naturally to the product marketer, or at least like it's a much smoother process when you don't have to fight quite so hard to get visibility into customer feedback, to get visibility in a roadmap, to get early access to documentation, and even just discussions around what's being built, how things are unfolding on the product and engineering sides.
And that's all so
Kind of
easily
back.
available. Like, I mean, it's
Yep.
like, and depending on the organization you're in and the company you come into, if you're like, I don't know if your build phases are like mine, but in some I've gone into, it's been like you're just launching stuff willy nilly and just like marketing, jump on board, help us out a little bit here. Versus, I
Right.
think time at AWS or Amazon, it's like well-oiled machine, right? You're very much in the trenches with what's going on.
That's right. Yeah, I think one of the missteps, a common misstep, is that product marketing is brought in too late into the launch process.
Sure deal.
Hey, we're 2 months out from launch. Product marketing, come in and clean things up. Put lipstick on
2
a
months
pig,
out.
right?
2 months out. Oh my gosh, that's like glory, man.
Oh, 2 weeks
There
out.
we go, man. Like the end of the week, we're launching this feature. Let's get with the analysts. And what? No, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
No, that's wow. Yeah. So there's all good stuff, and I'm look. It's an exciting process to go build out a function, build out the business, and kind of grow. Growth is awesome. But before I go any further, like we're digging in quick because there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. I want to pause for a second and ask you, as we do with all of our guests, what's your origin story? How did you get into this? Because there's going to be people listening out there, man, that sounds good. It sounds like something I might want to do. And not every path is the same, right? Not every journey is. I think it's always good to learn from others. So how did you get involved? And tell us a little about yourself in that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something interesting about product marketing. I find that people get into it from a broad variety of backgrounds and origins, if you will. My wife is actually also in product marketing. Her route was much more direct. It's what she actually studied, right, in business school. I've worked with product marketers who started off in archaeology or actually were software developers and then ended up on the marketing side. To some degree, it enriches the function. And if you have a team of people that kind of have different backgrounds, I think that can be great. I did come in more from the marketing side of things originally, although my first job out of undergrad was in government. very different. I was working on some kind of urban renewal program in a post-industrial part of New England. And I quickly pivoted from there to the marketing side and in particular to tech. And so living in Boston at that time, there was a pretty healthy ecosystem of startups and kind of mid-sized tech companies. So I was working for an agency supporting kind of marketing and communications for all these startups. And like at that time, what was emerging as this ecosystem of cloud and big data and all this exciting stuff. And what is that? What is cloud computing? What is that? What is virtualization? What's a hypervisor?
Oh, dear.
And so I just dug in. I did a lot of reading, a lot of self-teaching as I eased into as like self-taught on the tech. I've always been passionate about technology on a personal level, was building like Dreamweaver websites in junior high or whatever. But in the deeper tech and the infrastructure side of things, in enterprise software, a lot of self-teaching, took some night classes as well. But yeah, just dug into, remember like taking a weekend to read like the Dummy's Guide to Virtualization and Cloud Computing. And that's, you got to get going because people move fast in the industry.
That's true.
So that was how I got into cloud and data and tech. But then product marketing in particular, so I came over to IBM. You know this story well. You were there at the time. I came over to IBM to work in an organization that was built around an acquisition of a startup in the cloud database space. And I initially came in a content function, in a content strategy role. But from there, just quickly pivoted to product. I think that's just been the trend, as I've always been curious about the tech, like wanting to get closer to I love to learn. I like to challenge myself. Always curious, like what's going on the other side there. Like how can I get closer to the details and the goodness. Yeah, I think within a year or so at IBM, I had switched over to the PMM side, worked on a variety of kind of cool emerging tech at IBM, from cloud to blockchain, things like that. Then from there, went to AWS. So that I wanted to talk about like the vortex of all the stuff that was happening in the industry at the time. AWS was obviously central to a lot of those transformations. Spent a good amount of time at AWS, again, supporting a range of products, mostly in the database space. But from there, I decided, hey, I've been working at some of the biggest companies in the world. Wouldn't it be cool to go to more of a growth stage company or mid-sized company? That's initially I went to Okta, which had recently IPO'd, and then actually went even smaller, went to a Series B startup. Red Panda helped them get to Series C and could double in size. And then, yeah, recently came to EDB, where back to this database space. Even some of the folks I'm working with now are folks that I worked with 10 years ago at IBM.
Circle, small world,
So
right?
cool. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's super good. One of the things that just to touch on early on when you're talking about your growth journey and you're getting involved in things, and I think of myself even as a manager when I'm trying to build a team out, right? Especially when you're talking tech marketing, is I try to keep half of the team really around, okay, you're domain experts, you know this stuff cold, but you really want to get closer to the customer, to the value, to like you want to convert from being a DBA and all of a sudden be like, why does a database matter? I would like to go further. And then the other half of the team, really, those people that can write, those people that can talk, communicators that are core, but maybe someone like yourself, where like you're coming in, you're like, I'm hungry. I've got a thirst for this. I want to go try out new technologies. I'm going to read the Dummy's Guide to virtualization. Snooze fest, probably. But, oh my God.
Vector database.
Ah, yes. No, but and then you come together, and then I don't know. I felt that was always a happy, like, back of the envelope place to start, right? You need both of those areas to feed upon one another. But yeah, I know. Look, you have an awesome background, and I think it's very interesting too. Lately, is going from the big enterprises, getting some of that small startup experience, now going back into a little bit larger, a little bit more mature, but like you could pick from both different areas of expertise. Super cool. So look, we could probably dive in further on this stuff, but I want to get to the big behemoth here. And that is, you talked about it earlier. Like you just went through a massive launch, right? And you're new to an organization, totally changing lots of stuff, right? If you go back into the Wayback Machine, you can probably look at old EDB versus it is now. And it's like, good God, what just happened? So talk us through this launch and what was the reason for it? What was the catalyst? And take us through that, like why?
Yeah, definitely. Um, a number of kind of forces at play. One is I mentioned, and I know the audience is not all necessarily in tech or even in particular in like cloud infrastructure, databases, or anything like that. So I'll try to keep things at a pretty high level, but the technology that EDB focuses on, which is Postgres, again, an open source database technology, it's been around for a good while, right? Since the 90s, but has really skyrocketed in particular in the last 5 or so years. It's come to be like the favored database of developers. Even more than that, because it's a very extensible technology, there are a lot of like kind of utilities and modifications out there that can be used to extend the functionality to support different types of data, different use cases. One of those, which is called PG Vector, turns PostgreSQL from a standard database into a vector database that can support AI workloads and applications, essentially like storing data in a way that it can be used to train AI
Oh,
models,
cool.
large language models in particular. Um, so because of this kind of extensibility of the technology, there's a lot that's been developed out there in the developer community. But again, EDB kind of being a leader in this space has a good ability to organically build on that open source and launch commercial features and products that take that value and extend it even further for customers. And another thing that's happened is on the inorganic side has been some strategic acquisitions that EDB has made in the last number of years. And one in particular last year of a company called SplitGraph. EDB acquired a technology that allows Postgres to become a data warehouse, to become an analytics engine. And I won't go super into the details on all that, keep it high level, but just to say that there's been some community-oriented developments, there's been some M&A developments with EDB that have collectively pushed us to not just a multi-product company, but really starting to become a platform-oriented company where we have a variety of solutions that kind of need to be integrated in a more holistic way to serve the modern enterprise across these, in particular these new use cases. How do I, like AI, what no one was thinking about it a couple of years ago, or at least outside of a science fiction context, right? And then all of a sudden, everybody's thinking about it. But it's still largely in the phase of not just even proofs of concept, but like in some ways fun and games, right? Like we use AI to generate amusing images, songs. Obviously, we use it to sanity check ourselves and ChatGPT and whatnot. But in terms of like production use cases, and in particular for like highly regulated industries where data accuracy is critical, right? You can't just go out there with stuff that's 50% accurate. And a recent study found that ChatGPT is only accurate like 50% of the time. That's why data infrastructure really becomes critical to getting to the next stage of AI adoption. We need better tools to govern the quality, the accuracy of data so that models are trained to be more accurate, to hallucinate less, and enterprises can get over this hump from fun and games with earlier stage generative AI to actually launching AI applications that can transform their business. So that's the wave that we are riding. That's really where our customers want us to go. And so that was another big driver in the launch. But what that meant for a company that's been around a few decades is me coming in as a new product marketing leader, I have to look across at, hey, we've got um, decades worth of great technology, existing product lines, solutions, tools, services, and support is a huge piece of our business, professional services. How do you bring all that together and then make it make sense with these recent acquisitions and these new product launches
Yeah.
and the overall positioning that we're trying to take in the market of moving from just a kind of a database company to a data and AI. It is like you said a very big thing because it's bigger than just a product launch. It's a reimagining of our portfolio, how we want to position our portfolio and how we want to emphasize what we want to emphasize and in some cases de-emphasize from our kind of at this point pretty expansive portfolio of tools and extensions and so on to being more of a what people want, what customers in our space want today is they want a platform experience. They want to be able to
Mhm.
have a one-stop shop for all the capabilities that they need versus a kind of large Chinese menu of options.
It really seemed like from the outside looking in, it looked like an entire corporate company change, but being led at the core by the platform re-envisioning and the product side. Sometimes it's like companies will, hey, we're going to rebrand and put some new logo and some new colors, whatever. But this was really about not only the new focus, or not new focus, but like I would say the special focus on AI, but also then the acquisitions, the other stuff, bringing it in, bringing these different disparate pieces that might have been sitting out there, bring it together, build that platform, and kind of align as that as a company.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, and I don't want to understate the brand aspect of this as well. Our marketing and comms teams did a tremendous job transforming our brand, right? Our
Sure.
look and feel, really modernizing our look and feel on our website in many ways. Yeah, and then of course it's an interplay, right? Because brands should be rooted in messaging, and but products also have brands, right? And even the product experience, right? You're talking like a modern software experience is UX rich, right? And so that branding comes to life in the product itself and the product UI, and it all has to connect, right? And so a few months is not a huge runway to get ramped on everything
Yeah,
that's happened to
totally
date,
not.
and then wrangling it all together and making sure that all these disparate pieces are talking to each other. And there's inevitably stuff that gets overlooked, right? And you're making that final push and realizing, oh man, we forgot about this web page. What about this piece of documentation?
Dead
What are we gonna do
links,
with this piece?
old
Yeah,
name.
and that's where it becomes a bonding experience in the trenches, cross functionally. It is all of a sudden your best friend is a guy that works in documentation that you never spoken to
Yeah,
before.
right.
So
Name now, man. We gotta go. No, I would say like the other fun thing, if you think about the pre-cloud and post-cloud, right? The pre-cloud would be is you were still using product with the old name on it, and it was I don't want to throw anything under the bus, Infosphere, and there were some areas where the name changed like 7 different times, and at the end of the day, it was like still the old product from 10 years ago when you're using it. So
that's right.
that was always total pet peeve as a marketer that it's not perfect. We've gotten a little bit better where, look, you have the legacy names because customers are used to that too, right? So you don't always want to throw that out away. But at some point, we need to migrate away from that, get the new messaging, get the new branding, and put it into place.
That's right. And I would say I've been fortunate to work with go-to-market and marketing and product teams that do care deeply about product truth and credibility with our customers, with our users, so that, hey, the stuff that we're saying, that we're talking about on the website, there's a direct thread that connects it to what your hands-on keyboard experience is as a developer, as an admin. And that's it. It's another kind of product marketing topic that we could get into or not, but is, yeah, you've got aspirational things, you've got forward-facing things. You're always trying to find that center of gravity where you can communicate value in the best way while still staying true to where the product is at today and what the experience of the customer is going to look like on the other side once they've gone through the
Yes,
transaction.
segue there for a second. I think that's media, and that's anyone, and this is a very product management, product marketing focused, and with the rest of marketing around it is, how far do you sell the roadmap, and how well do you launch products that are to be determined or to come, right? Like they've had companies where it was, hey, it had to happen in the same quarter for revenue recognition, or some other companies would be like, it has to be within a year that they were very clear on, and you would have like trials and things like that getting an MVP. But then you have some that are vaporware and never come to market, yet companies keep doing it over and over again. I know you've been through a number of these things. What's your opinion on this? And what's your opinion on how far to sell the roadmap? Because I think that's a product marketing, product management. Also, it's a senior executive type thing where you need some tenets as an organization about what is good to go and what isn't.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's $1 million question in many ways.
Backpedal.
Um, um, yeah, I think, again, if you think from tenants, what's super important to me is just personally and professionally is credibility,
True.
right? Is you don't want to lose credibility. You don't want to lose credibility as a brand. You also don't want to lose credibility as yourself, right? As the person who is responsible for taking a product to market or for how that product is positioned on a website, in some piece of marketing collateral, etc. For me, it's always been really important to dig in and keep digging in and keep asking questions and really have as deep of an understanding as I can from where I sit about when is not just the product available, when are these features available, what is that going to look like? So a good way to bring clarity is one of the things that I engaged our kind of release management and operations folks on early here was making sure that we had ultra clarity on how we tiered our launches. And we came up with actually four tiers
4 tiers.
of product
Do
releases.
tell.
Yeah.
Do tell.
Yeah, the tiers. Okay, so like a tier one would be a net new product, essentially, or a net new major capability. A tier two would be a major new feature. A tier three would be more of a minor feature. And then a tier four would be something that doesn't need to be communicated proactively, that can just go into our release notes and our documentation. So it'd be like a bug fix patch, something like that. And yeah, that was interesting because usually I've seen a 3-tier system, but we got to where we realized, hey, we actually have this other category of like stuff we're tracking in the roadmap, but the PR team doesn't necessarily need to know. The sales team doesn't necessarily need to know. We just need to make sure that it's documented and that our like technical field is aware.
Good too for accounting in product management, right? Where because a lot of times you're spending time on some of those areas, and I know you're not going to drive them out to market, but you need to get credit for it, right? And make sure, hey, why is Sally working on this for 5 months and then it goes nowhere? It is going somewhere, right? And you need to make sure that's has executive view on it as well.
That's right. Yeah, it's great for accountability. Yeah, and so through that exercise, when you understand how you tier everything in your roadmap, then you understand what the go-to-market implications are, what all the downstream implications are. And you can keep a better center of gravity of truth as well, right? So for each of these launches, whether they be tier 1, 2, 3, or 4, you can track the associated documentation, right? Where's the product narrative? Where's the engineering roadmap information, the technical specs, the documentation? And then as you develop product marketing assets, you can track those alongside each of those as well. And so it brings a kind of more of a reality to every launch. Hey, this isn't just a collection of bits and bobs that we decided to announce. This is a real thing. We have a real process for releases and for launches. And each of those has a set of core assets that kind of starts on the product and engineering side and goes through the full life cycle of the product to obviously product marketing and then ultimately to PR, communications, social media teams, other go-to-market teams as they develop all of their collateral. But that's the best way I've found to navigate that is you keep your launches and your associated messaging as close as possible to the actual product roadmap, what's actually being delivered and when. It's never going to be a 100% perfect process, but there's always going to be pressures and even very good reasons to talk about future-facing things or things that are coming down the pipe. But another thing I would say is just being clear with customers about where things are at, right? In our recent launch, we announced some GA capabilities, but we also announced a tech preview for an upcoming AI product. And on our website, it's very clear, hey, this is in tech preview. Here's a registration form. Sign up, engage us to learn more, and even, start to play around with it. So as you go through that tiering and kind of launch process, what type of launch is it, right? Is it a general availability? Is it a preview? Is it a beta? And then making sure that you communicate that availability status clearly to customers.
Yeah, no, one of the things you brought up earlier too that I wanted to just touch on that I thought was great was the idea of credibility with customers. And sometimes they say you earn trust. Well, it's also keeping trust, right? And so making sure that customers are front and center as you're thinking through what to say and why to say it, that's super, super smart. And like once any company deviates from that, man, it's Once you lose that credibility, you lose that trust, you're gone. And it takes you 5x to even try to build it back. So I think that's really smart.
That's right.
So I want to jump on this. Okay, we can talk about this stuff for a long time. I do want to ask you though, specifically around the launch itself. Okay. What did you learn from it? Because you're entering in, and I think it's interesting, as you said, getting in the AI space. It's hot. It's right now, people are trying to figure out, how do I leverage this? And all of a sudden you see everyone popping out with the same looking image with misspelled words, like the hallucination aspect. And I don't know, marketers were told we're going to lose our jobs. And at the same time, now it's like marketers are laughing at that saying, it's for ideation, helping us along and moving the needle. And who's to say what AI is going to get into next? Specifically, writing is one aspect, images another, music, voice, whole slew of things, right? That like you could jump into. And so that's a level of FUD, I would say, or misinformation that's in the market. And it depends on who you talk to, right? On what AI means. And now all of a sudden you're like, we're betting the farm on jumping in with AI. Tell me, right? Like, how has it been? How has the launch? How has customer feedback been? What are analysts saying? Because you had just recently done this. It's got enough time for people to say, whoa, what's EDB doing? So I think, tell us a little bit about that. And then like maybe some lessons and I don't know, like where you think you hit it out of the park and maybe some areas, hey, you might want to, hey, we probably should have done this. Be honest about it, right?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is, look, I've been working in various kind of marketing roles in tech for 15 years, almost 15 years, been doing product marketing in the kind of data space specifically for a good chunk of that. Now AI, a bit newer for me. I definitely have had exposure to it from going back to my time at Amazon. Definitely have been orthogonal to it, right? Like the technologies that I've worked on have been related, have been necessary for in many ways AI applications to exist. But grabbing the bull by the horns for AI was a bit new for me. And it can be intimidating in the sense that it's so top of mind. The analyst buzz is so intense that it's easy to think, man, I don't know what I'm talking about with AI. Is it that credibility thing, right? Here's something I learned. The space is so nascent, so new. Everybody's learning. Yep. And it's okay. We're all in it together. That's actually something I really like about the space is that everyone is in learning mode, including the AI models are learning. We're trying to help them to learn faster and better. So it's very cool. I was actually just reading a blog from the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. They invest in a lot of AI companies and just data and tech companies generally. And this blog was basically making the case that we're now entering phase 2 of AI. Phase 1 was all about ideation and, again, going back to the kind of fun and games like, hey, cool generative AI, you can make these Hollywood trailers.
Oh, I don't even go more simple than that. I want a red dog sitting on top of a blue car.
Yeah. And it's great. It's cool. It's super impressive. But what it's not necessarily is enterprise grade, right? It's not. Because, again, for the kind of enterprises and public sector organizations that we typically serve, and our biggest verticals are like financial services, public sector, telecommunications, etc. Talk about highly regulated, compliance-driven organizations. You can't, 99% accurate isn't good enough, let alone 50% accurate. So no room for hallucinations, no room for wrong inferences and things like that. So everybody's in the same boat of trying to figure out how do we make this stuff work. And how do we make it work for business? And going back to that blog, it's, hey, phase 2 is all about wrangling this mess and actually, how do we actually get to quality AI functionality? How do we actually get to outputs that are like ready for business, ready for productive use?
True value.
And part of that, a lot of it is the data. A lot of the challenge is data, because it's like the data, it's not good enough to just go to the public internet and just harvest everything and try and train these models. You need domain-specific data. You need curated and cleansed data and well-governed data to make these things work in a way that's going to work for major enterprises. But anyway, this is all a roundabout way of saying I got comfortable again with learning a new space, right? And a space that can seem a bit intimidating. But I think that was a great growth for me, and just realizing that, hey, everyone is in learning mode. We're all teaching each other about this new space. And so that's been really great. And the response has been awesome. We've had some press mentions recently that were not proactive on our part. It's just people observe the market observing that, hey, EDB is moving into this space as part of a broader trend of data companies kind of, pivoting and optimizing for what's to come here. Building on that, a learning actually has been the enthusiasm and the hunger is so strong, both internally from our field and from our internal organization, as well as externally. If I had to go back and do it again, I might have doubled down even more on the content on AI and the educational content, because again, you can falsely make the assumption that, hey, there's a wealth of information out there already on this stuff. Not the case, right? And a common complaint among our target persona of engineers is that a lot of the content that is out there is tainted by its very vendor. It's not neutral content, right? It's like vendors are pushing their various agendas. So from the kind of pure kind of open source learning content standpoint, I might have even backed some of that in a little bit. We have a great plan around publishing developer content in the remainder, really for the remainder of the year on these topics, but I might have even just pulled some of that in and really doubled down on it earlier, because it's just the hunger for it is really hard to believe.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, because you think about it in the core, like education, especially in new markets, new developments, new technologies, is so key. And you can't assume, as even you bring it up with AI, oh, I got everyone smarter than me, I don't know enough about this stuff. But you're right, everyone is learning. Not just AI is learning, everyone's learning, and they're learning applications. How do we use this? What should we use it for? What should we not use it for? And then there's the whole idea of ethics around it. What's ethical, what's not, right? And how do you pay for it? Things like that. So that's a whole nother world. But I think there's opportunity, and specifically from a product marketing perspective, thought leadership and ownership. And that comes with education. That comes with, and something I always feel very strongly about, is that organizational leaders need to talk, or the thought leaders in organizations, the development as well, all the way up. Could be marketing, could be the CEO, CMO. You got to talk about this and get credit for it in many ways. And that's important. And specifically, as you're jumping into something like AI, I agree with you. You need to own that narrative, own that education, because when people search for it, and this gets into the whole thing of marketing and being everywhere, and every aspect of a launch touches everything. You touch SEO, right? If I'm searching for something, am I getting back to that information that Doug put out there with his team? It's so important. And I don't know, I'd be bold enough to say that companies should even invest more somewhere. If you're going to invest a little bit of more money, invest it less in advertising some ways. First invested in education and the narrative, and that core story, or that core how to get from A to B to C. Then go advertising. But you need that story, you need that knowledge, you need that education first and foremost. I'll get off my pedestal now, but I feel very strongly about that. I think you hit a great point.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is something that's very strong in EDB's DNA, being a kind of an open source software community leader. Always been big on putting a lot of content, not just code, but content out there on PostgreSQL topics. I think now, again, we're brave new world a little bit with the AI topics. But yeah, the education piece is critical. And if you look at some of the really successful companies out there in our space, not just in our space, in all spaces, but in our space for sure, you'll see a pattern there. I'll say MongoDB or AWS have continuously focused on that educational content, that kind of, because our technical buyers have a great sniff test for BS, right?
Sure.
For vapor, for just buzz and jargony stuff. Putting out authentic learning material, they know it comes from a vendor. You don't have to worry about hiding the fact that, in fact, in many ways, you don't want to hide the fact that it's coming from a vendor. But that educational tone, that, hey, you're coming bearing gifts, right? If you're going to go knock on somebody's door, if you're going to go knock on a stranger's door, like, come bearing gifts. Give them a good reason to listen to what you have to say.
Always.
Yeah.
Hey, a couple of things I want to touch on, one or two more topics before we close on this, because, man, I think we can go all night and all day on this. So as we're talking through some of this, I want to talk specifically on some of the messaging piece of it and how in the database space, or even it could be the launch, it could just be EDB in general. And you touched on some of it with the different launches and the tiers, right? Hey, we have a new product coming out, a new feature coming out, our new, like, just a rev. Like, how do you handle, you personally, feature versus function versus value? And maybe a little bit of your journey there at EDB and how you handle that. Because I think that's hard. We're talking technical marketing, right? Not just, we're not selling
Yeah.
lollipops or something. There's a level of grit and a level of content that needs to be honorable and honest. And so features and functionality, how to use it, take it away. How do you handle that?
I think there's a misconception sometimes that if you are doing technical marketing for technical personas, that means that you need to be at this kind of like feature function level all the time. And there's of course an appropriate time to be at that level. In particular, when you're talking like what we just were at with educational hands-on tutorial type of content, you're going to have to be at the feature function level a lot of the time. But when you're doing messaging exercises, when you're talking positioning and web content and announcements, value orientation is of course critical. I think part of the reason it's critical is, especially if you work in a space that I don't want to say is crowded, but has a lot of players, a lot of established players and always a lot of emerging players. What you don't want to be is just competing with everyone on it for everything all the time, right? You want to be able to have those wedges. You want to be able to establish your uniqueness. And you do that through demonstrating value. Because if you're only talking about the strengths of various features and functions, then you're going to be trapped down in this bake-off, this endless bake-off against other products. So you want to help your customers to understand the value that they might not even be thinking about, right? And so what it really means is that you have to pull your conception of the customer journey even earlier, right, than when they're actually seeking a solution to their problem. You actually, in many ways, want to preempt their discovery process to actually. Some of this goes into more of the territory of like thought leadership and marketing and the world of tech, like developer evangelism and things like that. But you always want to be preceding the market, if you will, right? Getting ahead of when somebody's actually looking for a solution and helping them to understand that they have a problem or lack a certain value that they may not even be aware of.
So that's, and real quick, I'm gonna get my soapbox again. And that's where it's so essential, specifically in product marketing in general, to understand your customers, understand their pain points. What are their challenges? Otherwise, the stuff you're talking about, no one's gonna know. Because how are you gonna get out in front of that unless you're close to what their challenges are and understanding, man, what can you bring to the table? Anyway, I'll shut up now. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that empathy and deep understanding of the customer and the target personas is such a critical part of that. And you're never gonna, as much as I have worked in this space, I'm never gonna be a database administrator or platform engineer or a sysadmin or a data scientist, but I'm never going to fully understand their day-to-day per se. But a buyer can sense if you've put in the time to understand their pains, right? And there's many different ways to do that, right? There's a myriad of ways, whether it's the traditional focus group or market research or just sitting on sales calls or going to trade shows and talking to customers directly. Endless ways to get that intel, but you got to put that time in. If you don't put that time in, then you're just not, you miss the beating heart, right? Mm-hmm. And then that's why we instinctively will go back to the feature functionality stuff, because if you don't have a sense for the beating heart of your persona, of your target persona, then you're just going to talk about functionality. You're just going to talk about features because you don't know what else to talk about. Yeah. So putting in that time is absolutely critical. And we could go on and on about it, but there are some interesting methodical ways of getting to that, right? And in many ways, there are some interesting Venn diagrams you can think about. It'd be easier if I had a whiteboard here, but you've got what your products or offering can provide for a customer. You've got the customer with their pain points, and then you've got other alternatives out there, whether they be direct competitors or free open source tools out in the market or kind of bespoke ways that people do things today. And there's an overlap there of those three circles, if you will. Where you don't want to be is in that space where they all overlap, because that's sameness. What you want to be is in, call it the wedge, that overlap between your customers' pain points and your unique value. Uniqueness, that's where you want to be. So that to the extent that you can demonstrate unique value without trying to compete as much on a feature function level, on kind of a bake-off level with other competitors out there, I think that is the sweet spot. Easier said than done. Probably one of the more challenging aspects of product marketing or marketing is like getting to that uniqueness. But yeah, I think when you can get that nirvana, it makes all the difference.
No, that's great. Yeah, I know. Look, I think we're closing out of time here. I got like 1,000 more questions I can ask you right now. I'd love to dig in even further into persona development and things like that. But I want to pull back a little bit because I do want to get a couple last fun questions here. Look, you talked a little about your career and how you got into becoming head of product marketing at a large enterprise. And yeah, you've had some different avenues, alleyways, really understanding the educational piece and really learning. But if there's other folks out there right now that are like, hey, what would your recommendation be for those that maybe want to do what you do? Like how to get started in this space, or what's their first, or even if they're in something else differently, how do they get closer to the world of Doug Flora?
A couple of things come to mind. And I didn't work at a startup until a bit later in my career, although earlier in my career, I worked with a lot of startups. In a consulting capacity, I engaged with a lot of startups, and I did work at a smaller agency. If you can find an opportunity to join a startup in an interesting space, there's no better place to just be able to wear any number of hats and roll your sleeves up. And usually startups are open-minded about, particularly for entry-level jobs, about people who maybe need to learn a little bit on the job, but if they have the right mentality, if you have the right roll up your sleeves mentality, startups can be a very welcoming environment for that. So I think if you can find an interesting startup to work at, and look, maybe ultimately it's not product marketing or even marketing, but you'll definitely have opportunities to try out different things, see what sticks, see what you're passionate about. That's one thing that comes to mind. And I think, just to be frank, with the current market, those jobs in some ways can be easier to find maybe than the traditional big tech jobs. But otherwise, I would say, look, if that's not an easy path initially, think about other ways that you can just go out, start creating content. It's never been easier in many ways to be a content creator and to join interesting conversations. It used to be you had to be very intentional about it and have like a prerequisite of knowledge or skills to go build your own website, understand how to host a site, and maybe know some Dreamweavers.
Yeah.
And
host a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be a lot more effortful to do things like that and to get an audience. In many ways, it's never been easier to create content, broadcast it, get an audience, join. If you don't want to even do that stuff, just join existing conversations, whether they be on a social media platform or online communities, etc. Go engage, right? I think don't be afraid. Don't have imposter syndrome. Just go start at the appropriate level. Maybe there's some more learning oriented or more junior communities out there, but just seek and you will find. Go explore, have fun, don't take things too seriously, and don't be afraid to fail.
Oh God, yeah. Look, you're kicking up some strings here. It hit my heart. You got to fail fast. You got to fail. Otherwise, you're not going to learn. And being a dad too, it's one of these things where you can't be fear of it. The imposter syndrome, you got to get out in front of this stuff and just be like, just do it. And I don't want to pose for Nike here. It's go try it. Go seriously, go do it, fail, learn, and then do it again. Or if you don't fail, you succeed, thumbs up. But beware, someday you're going to fail. And unless you learn how to handle that failure, learn from it and get back on your horse again, it's going to be harder for you. So I can't fight anything you said. I think that's all good stuff. And I agree 100%. Like we're at time here, but I'd love to have you on for at some point, another time as well, because there's a lot to dig into. But one last thing for you real quick is, what are you doing? Like your personal side, do you have any recommendations? I don't know, like book, movie, video game, whatever it is. What's Doug Flora into right now? And what could you share with the audience on something you're like, yeah, you should check this out?
I can share some recent reads on both kind of the business side and the fun side. A business book that I read recently that I would highly recommend was called Busting Silos, and it's by Hilary Carpio and Travis Henry. But it's actually heavily based on the work that the CMO and CRO of Snowflake did to build out their named account and account-based marketing and sales strategy. But it's really about, it's in the name, busting silos. How do you build that cross-functional discipline? And how do you get away from Larry, you and I both worked at Amazon, where there's a mentality of, you never say that's not my job. It's similar. Like, how do you get out of the, hey, that's not my job, or like, hey, no, we've got a goal, we've got a thing we've got to go do. In their case, it was like, how do we laser target this smaller number of strategic named accounts and just get inside them, talk to the whole kind of complex buying committee within there with very tailored, hyper targeted messages and so on. So a little bit tactical, but super interesting. I would say particularly if you work in technology, marketing, or sales. On the personal side, so I have been getting back into my roots of like sci-fi and stuff. So I recently, after the recent Dune films came out, Dune was one that I never actually read, so I went
Ooh.
back and I've been reading. I'm about halfway through the original Dune novel, so I'm really I'm digging that. I like those very like detailed science fiction books. Was always a big Lord of the Rings fan and stuff like that. It's good fun, but I still haven't seen the second Dune film, so probably this weekend I think it's on HBO Max or something, so I'll check that out.
All good. No, super good, Doug. Hey, look, we're gonna call it here. It's been a super long, super good conversation. As I said, we can do this much longer too. So much to dig up, so much good learning from you. If anyone here has any questions for you, right? What's the best way for anyone to find you online?
Yeah, actually a couple of ways. You can find me on LinkedIn, Douglas Flora. You can find me on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. My handle is dsflora. I don't post as much on X as I used to. I also have an Instagram account. This goes back to the personal passions. As a former DJ, I have a record collecting Instagram account called LP Lounge. So you can
Whoa.
check that out. You can see what I'm listening to. So I got the record collection that I've been growing since college years when I was a college radio DJ. But yeah, that's how you can find me online, or shoot me hey, look, send me an email, dsflora@icloud.com.
Sounds good.
So
Yeah, I'll put in the show notes as well. People can exit link to it. So all good, Doug. Thank you again. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
great.
Take care.
Thanks, Larry.